Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Send a coded message for Starfleet Commander, Priority 1. Federation science vessel Grissom arriving, Genesis planet, Mutara sector to begin research. JTS to Bond Commanding.
Aye, sir. Coding now.
Hello and welcome back. We're going to start week 2 of not working on the Grissom. And I've come to some harsh realizations over the weekend. And the harshest of all is I think I need to drill into these pylons to put screws or at least brass pins in it to pin this through the pylon and into the deck plate. It's going to be easier to go ahead and drill the holes in the pylons first, and then I can put those pylons on the other part, and that will help me map out where those holes need to be. But leaving it here on the template to start with is the best idea. So I've got, and you'll notice, well, maybe you won't notice until I show you how out of whack these joints are. Well, these joints are easy to patch. You can fix that. The idea is to make yourself square. Make yourself happy with how it has to go, and then you fill in those gaps with either some body putty or some epoxy sculpt or something. But I think this, well, for the time being, will be the last amount of work I need to do on this. I am mapping out where my lights need to go. I put in a plea for mercy to friend of the show and Good Egg Elliot Brown, and I think he's going to be helping me out with the strobe circuit. I still have the red and green nav lights, which are constantly on, so I have to decide for myself the most effective way of running those. And once we get these holes drilled, I'll help you. I'll show you how all those get mapped out. But there's still some work to be done on these pylons as far as sanding them and getting them ready. But before I do that, while I've got everything in its correct orientation, I want to go ahead and drill those holes out. Okay, now that I've got the pylons pinned to this top deck, I'll probably end up putting wood screws into that, something with a flat head that I can putty over. I'm getting to the tedious, well, not tedious isn't the right word, exacting maybe is the best word, exacting thought process here of running channels for wiring. Now, I have the tiny Grissom on top of this so I can see what's going on and have a better map for it. This area here, all of this top deck of the Grissom, actually I should probably have it sitting like that. All of this top deck is going to be covered by the dome, so I could cut into this at any point. The dome sits on top of here, so any of this area, you know, I don't want to go but so close to the edges of the deck, but anything like this is golden. Anything in here I can trim out. Here is where the engine sits. Now the engine overlaps the outside by about 1/2 inch. Is that 1/2 inch? That's about maybe 3/8 of an inch. So that's overlapping to the outside. So that leaves, if I was trying to channel out wiring to go from the nacelle to this area here where I'm going to be running my main light junctions, that means this is the smallest area right here that I can get away with. If I cut a channel right here and then feed it into this area where the engine sits, I can run very thin gauge wiring here and then run it up into the nacelle. Now, the nacelles themselves are solid. I wish they weren't, but they are. So I'm going to have to drill down through them for this light and for this light. Now if I drill a light here, or drill a line right here, straight down, it'll come out about there. I can cut a channel through this, but this is the area where those radiator fins sit. So let me get one of those. Alrighty, here is the radiator fin assembly that goes into the nacelle. Now, for some reason, this is not as tall as it should be. That radiator fin, checking again against the model and everything else, the radiator fin should be this entire height, but it is not. It is, it's got a bit of a gap where it is like that. So I can fill in this bottom, which I think is going to be the more easy one. I can put in a block to fatten that up. But that means I've got to chase a wire down through here into this point. Anything past this point on down, there's a natural wire chase here. So I could use that. I just have to cover it up when it gets to that point. So there's going to be some camouflaging and some wire channeling. Now this one here, if it goes straight down, it'll come out around here, which is no bueno. So if I channel this straight, if I channel it at an angle, now that's going to put the bulb at a weird angle. So I think what I'd like to do, we'll see if this is possible. If I drill straight down to here, about halfway, straight down to there, and I go straight in from here, maybe they will meet up. Maybe those two drill channels will meet up. We'll have to see how this is going to work out. You know, America is a land rich with traditions, and one of my favorite traditions is not being able to find something because you put it somewhere to keep it safe. I was looking for an attachment for my Dremel, and I could have sworn I knew exactly where it was. Tore the house apart, and just said, screw it, I'll go buy another one. Because, you know, that's rampant consumerism. And I know that full well in my heart that as soon as I open up this package, that I will find the part that I knew that I had, but I cannot lay my hands to. And I know that immediately when I go to put this away, I will put it in the same spot where the other one has been sitting the whole time laughing at me, mocking. But I just wasn't going to spend too much more time looking for it. I'm not one of these people who says, you know, time is money, because let's face it, I'm not doing, you know, rocket surgery here. I'm not, you know, researching a cancer cure. I'm building models. My time is valuable, but it's not, you know, precious like that. So I ran out and bought another one. And what this is an attachment for my Dremel that will allow me to sit it on a base like this. I'm sure you've all seen these. It screws onto the top of the Dremel, and it gives you basically a mini router. Before I open this, I'm going to look one more place, but I don't think it's going to be there. But what happens is you screw the router into the top of it, and you set the depth, and then you add. That way you know you're getting an even channel, because now that I am starting to map out the channels on this, I want to go ahead and do that. Now the first one I know I need to cut is going to be this one. This one's going to go all the way from the stem to the stern, all the way from the front to the back, and it's going to light up the warp engine or the impulse engines here, and it's going to go and it's going to exit up inside the dome where the small dome attaches here. I know I also have running lights that need to go here and here on this deck. There are no such lights on the top deck, only on the bottom of the deck. So what I'm thinking is, if I can channel these into here, then maybe I can hide them back in behind where my pylons are going. Because the only other option would be to channel one across to here. Well, you know, that's a straight shot. I may do that. If I go from here, the problem is much of this thing is empty. So I'm going to have to cheat these further back in like that. So it's going to have to get further back in because of the edge of this is where all of these parts I just put in. So if I channel a bulb here and I make a straight line from there to there, yeah, I'm going to run into some of that, but it might work because this has to be channeled out where the red bulb is going to go. So maybe I'm going to end up doing something like that. I just don't want to cut into that. All these things you got to think of. But what I want to be able to do is to clamp a straight edge down, even if I have to elevate this onto something else. I can clamp a straight edge down and run this along the edge and keep it straight. Because, you know, it's bad enough I'm going to be cutting into this hole, but if I can, you know, make a clean cut, then it's so much better. Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, and we're going to do some cutting today. You see all this massive pencil line, so those will all be cleaned off soon enough. But what I've done is, now that I've got the utensil that I was looking for, the setup, I did some test cutting, found that it was good, and decided now I'm going to continue. You might see this little channel I've cut in the bottom of the nacelle and up the side here. Now a lot of this is going to get covered by this, so I'm not worried about it. That's going to glue down straight, so I'm not going to worry about it. What I do need is to finish this line all the way out to where the rear strobe is going to go. On that front, I am expecting, hopefully today, well, you always expect hopefully, unless you expect unhopefully, and then that's called dreading. But I expect hopefully to get the second of 2 boxes from Elliott Brown today. Got a nice box in the mail yesterday with brass parts for the Jupiter 2 build. More on that later. But today I expect the strobe circuit he is so generously offering to me. I had one of his earlier flashing light circuits that I was planning on using for this, but it only strobed 4 bulbs, and I need 7 bulbs for this. So I asked him, sent him an email, say, hey Elliot, can I use this and just add a couple bulbs to it? And that's when he informed me that he was already in the process of sending me a new circuit board. So yay on you, you friend of the show you. If I ever meet you in person, the first beer's on me, and the second beer will be all over the floor. But that's coming. I've also ordered from Evans Lighting some green and red chip lights, the SM LEDs that I'm going to be scattering about. So what I'm going to be doing today is channeling the wires, or cutting the channels for the wires, and I'm mapping out where my free space is. That's why you see all these pencil lines here. I cut my first channel, proved that it could be done. The channel cut right here. Oops, get it in camera. There's a channel cut right here that I will putty over after I've run my wiring. And now that I know I'm going to be using mostly the magnetic wire, I made that one a little deep. I have since backed up a little bit and decided to go with a shallower channel. Alrighty, I got most of my cutting done, and I think once I realized I wasn't being counted off for neatness, it gets the job done. And I only had one errant where the Dremel just got completely out of hand, and that's here on the bottom plate, but that's easily disguised. But I've got all of my channels cut in, with the exception of the last one, and that's going to be the trickiest. It is going to be the channel that comes down the pylon and into the pontoon here, or conversely goes from the pontoon up into the deck. Since this is where my power and my switches and everything's going to be, I need to run power up to it. So it's going to sit something like this, and I am going to run power out up the pylon and into this space, and it's a question of how. I think I'm going to have to cut a channel with the cutting wheel, just a narrow channel, maybe something like follow one of these panel lines, which is, it's going to be tough because my first inclination would be to take it up through here and then down this panel line and then into the base. But that means cutting right about where all my infrastructure is there. This would be the easiest one because it would mean the least amount of cutting. I'd only have to make a channel here and at the base here, which is all pretty much a straight line, and I could do that. It's just a question of it's going to cut into where I've got this set. Well, if I do that and then bring it to this point and then bring it in here, I could do that because I've got a natural gap going on here. So if I cut this, cut a groove in here for it, and then do that, that I think would work. Okay, it's time to do the perilous cut, the most perilous cut of all, the unkindest cut of all, and that is going to be to make a channel right in here and then follow that curve right down through here. And the weapon of choice is the Dremel with the cutting bit on it, and because this is resin, I will be masking up. Well, now I would call that a resounding success. See, what we've got here now is a channel that is cut into here and comes down, takes a 90 degree, another 90 degree, and then empties into the body, which is wonderful. I also channeled out this little bit of the clear part that's going to go where the impulse engines are. And the only thing I have left to do is to drill out where the navs and strobes are going to go on the secondary hull and on the saucer section. This is, by the way, the piece that goes right in here, and the wire will go down next to it. Let me pull this off since it's easy enough to do. Pull this out. You can see the channel that I've cut right through here and then right down in here, and I can simply putty over that once that wiring has been run. But we sand that down a bit, we stick it in place, and you'll never, hopefully never see the wire or never know that it was there. But yeah, I've got all of the strobes and the navs mapped out. Like there's a nav here, there's a nav here, there's a strobe there. So I'm just going to take the drill while I've got it out and the drill bit the right size. I'm just going to go ahead and drill those out. I'm going to drill them out oversized because I can put the chip light back in the socket easier that way, and then just putty around it or epoxy around it once it's back in place. Holds the bulb in place and gives you a nice little lens over the top of it if you do it right. Putting my attentions to the bottom of the saucer, I was putting in the last of the running light holes, and I came across something that is no bueno. The bottom of the saucer has no grid lines. I find its lack of detail disturbing, and so luckily it's a circle, so I can get out the old beam compass, and mark it out, and I put a scriber in the pointy end. Ouch! And I'm using the hopefully accurate 1000 scale model as a kind of a guide as to where these lines should be. Again, it's only going to be a rough approximation. Let's go ahead and put all of these cleaning up. So I put the scriber in after I drew everything in and was happy with it. I'm scribing him, and hopefully that will be deep enough to follow the when I come to paint it, I can follow these lines. But luckily this is just a piece of styrene on the bottom, and it's pretty soft and scribes pretty easily. But you know, not to even have those penciled in is kind of no good. So let me finish doing this, and then we will have all of the I think we'll have all of the holes drilled and all of the lighting channels cut. Well, what do you think of that? That's a lot better now. It's got some it doesn't have the radius lines in it. It has the circumference lines in it, but it doesn't have the radial grid lines in it. So this is great. This is ready to go now. Let's pull this out. There's some minor work that needs to get done on the top of the saucer here. A lot of the entries to the 3 bays need cleaned up and repointed, but that's, in the grand scheme of things, not all that horrible. So you flip this over and you see this sits like this now, as it should. Now, there's one thing I did notice, and you know, you have to decide to pick your battles, but in order to get the main dock or shuttle bay straight on a line with the rest of the ship, which it is lined up with the here's the center line. You see where I'm going. Center line goes here. This raised bit here is not on the center line, and I don't know why. It's just not great sculpting by Alfred Wong, but you can trace the center line straight down through, and you can see where that guy right there ain't on the center. So outside of scraping all those off and recentering it, because actually these ones are fine. It's just this one here that's off, but it also means these ones are... No, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to leave it and accept it as it is. But you center everything like that. Put a string of LED strip lighting in here to light the windows, and there are windows that are here. Here's an example of a window. Here's an example. You can see them. They're there. I will mask those off before I paint anything, and I'll probably do the foil tape on the inside trick to keep the rest of the thing from, because this is a big shape here that doesn't need to have light block. But these these doorways here are way off, and there's a big old bubble here. So a lot of this needs resculpting around these entrances. But if it were easy, anybody could do it. And if it were perfect, it would be a styrene kit and not a resin kit, or not a garage kit. Oh no, see, that's not good. I just noticed that. That's not good. Dang. What am I going to do about that? Here's the problem. We'll see if it's the same issue here. Yeah, it is. Dagnabbit. Okay, here's the problem. This is where the bottom... Let's get the camera up. There we go. This is where the bottom strobe comes out, or running light. It's not a strobe, it's just a regular running light. It happens to be right smack dab in the middle of the bay. So any wiring that comes up, here is the, let me trace out the parameters of the bay. So the bay is going to come in like that, which means that's going to be right there on the floor. So I'm going to have to do something to cover that up, because I was hoping I would be able to just run wiring and not have to worry about it. But now I've got the inside wall of the deck. Well, you know, if you just put shuttle doors there on the outside, that might save a lot of heartache on a few fronts. Leave the front one open, because there is no front. There's no front strobe light here. But that would mean closing off the other 2 shuttle bays, and just putting doors there. Okay, so what I have just done that I did off camera, and now I'm telling you, is that I have taken some epoxy sculpt, rolled it into long snakes, and I have packed it around the bottom of the upper dome here, the upper saucer dome, because there were some gaps where it didn't, where it wasn't fully formed. It was just not well cast. It was lacking. But fortunately, it's not in anything that has to be where a window is, where anything's shining out. So what I did is epoxy sculpt, little snake of epoxy sculpt, pushed it into the bottom of the rim, and then put it all down here on a piece of wax paper. And that wax paper is going to allow me two things. A, I can pick it up and move it, and it's not going to stick to the epoxy sculpt. So once I pushed that down, I kind of trimmed off the overflow where it gouged out, and it's not filling in everything, but it's a great first step, and it'll give me a wonderful foundation to put in the rest. Like I said, I'm just trimming off a bit, and then then it'll sit on top of this piece when it's all said and done. Okay, so that just leaves us these warp nacelles. This is the last bit I can really do today. I'm waiting for supplies to come in, waiting for lights to come in. Can't really do anything more, but that's good because this stuff, it shouldn't be skimped on. You should spend the time. These are the warp nacelles. I drilled a slightly angled channel here for the light, for the nav light that goes up here. I drilled a straight line here for the strobe. I cut a little channel in here, hit more than a few air bubbles, but not enough to make my job any easier. But so when that gets wired in, that will go through this channel and then down and into the top deck of the kit. But and of course these pieces will fit over top of it, which is going to cover up most of this channel, leaving me only just that little bit there that needs to be covered with either a putty or an epoxy sculpt or just some JB weld. We'll see. You know, I might even put just a flat, I don't know. We'll worry about that later. But what I need to do is to build up these pieces because they are not quite tall enough. And what I need to do is to glue a bottom one on here, which will be great because what will happen is that I'll leave this off until everything is wired in. Then glue this down. There's a gap right in here that will allow the wiring to chase up through that. I need to drill out this corner just a little bit more, and that will assure that I've got enough room for the wiring to go. And then this plate here will cover, and it brings it up right about to the right height so that it fills in everything. Let's see if that does the same on this one, because if I've learned anything about this kit is that it is not consistent. What might look good on one does not necessarily look good on the other. I think that'll do. I think that'll do by the time I get everything. Yeah, okay. So let's get that channel drilled out a little bit more and get these filler pieces glued down. Good morning, welcome back. It is Wednesday, and I am kind of at a standstill on my running lights and strobes because I don't have those bulbs here. So I'm turning my attention to the bulbs that I have, and that is what I'm going to be doing in the main saucer here. I've got a ring set up that I'm just going to plop something like that, and I'm going to put a string of cool white strip lights on there. And then when you sit this on top of it, it should shine out for these two different layers of windows that will be blocked off. I realize there are also windows in here, but I'm thinking I can get away. It was also a strobe on the very top, but get away with maybe doing an inverse tube on the inside here to light up the inside windows. All of this has got me thinking that I might need more power than I was planning. So I'm thinking that I may put this these lights on a separate power source. I've got plenty of room in the pontoon for that power source. I'm not worried about that. And I can, the way I'm planning it will be to make the top front of the pontoon removable, so all of my switches and my batteries will be in there. Still think I've got plenty of room for that. My concern is that I might need to channel up another, cut another channel for the wiring that needs to go up here. I don't know how much of it I can, and until I get the strobes and the running lights in and see how much space in those gullies that's going to take, that will tell me whether I either need to make one of them deeper or cut another channel somewhere else to run the lights for this. But I first want to get this built and wired in and see how much light it's going to kick out, which will help me determine the overall the amount of strip lights that I need. And I had thought originally of just doing isolated LEDs, but the way these windows run, there's a bank of them here, and there's like basically two strips that go all the way around, one upper and one lower, and I think that's going to be more effectively handled with just a ring of strip lights. Okay, here's the ring all lit up. I know that's probably blowing out the camera light sensor, but here you go. Let me see what we can do. Now obviously there will be light blocking in the areas where there is no windows, or where there are no windows. And I think this is also going to help to block any or to light up any faux landing bays I may make here. I still need to cover those areas where there's going to be a marker light, so I probably have to channel some these I can probably get away with putting a conduit over, just putting a little C piece of either half round that's got a cutout in it, or a piece of C channel over top of that wiring that's going to go just right there and on both sides. But that's giving me a good light donut. This is something similar to what I've done. Oh, I did that in the AT ship. I think I've done it in several, where you just, it helps because you don't have, obviously you don't have to light block what's going on in here, but I do want to have some lighting in here because of what's happening in the top dome. There's a strobe here, but there's also a ring of lights. If I can get away with maybe putting one or two LEDs there. No, I need something more. I need something more even and uniform. So I think I will run a string the opposite way inside a tube, going that way. So I just need to take the measurement of that tube. Yeah, that'll work. So what I need to do now is to go ahead and nail this ring down to the inside. And that's simple gluing and screwing to do that. And I'll run the wiring down into the center because I've got plenty of access room. I've got plenty of access room on the top here. This is where I've cut out all this area yesterday to channel lighting. And you can see I've got the top dome lit up. Now that is simply taped in place for right now. We are a long ways away from doing anything permanent there. But rather than lighting up the whole inside of the dome, that is simply a, flip this over, it's just a plate. I've done this a million times before on every Enterprise that's out there. When you're lighting up just the bottom of a dome and you don't want to spread that light everywhere, you just make a little plate that you can fit here. Now of course I've got a hole in the center there that I can run the strobe up through, run that strobe wire up through. But once all this is painted and the window masks are on and painted, then of course all that's going to light up are the windows. But it's a good way to diffuse the light and get it spread out as much as possible. I'll show you what this circuit board. I'm not that elaborate. What this panel looks like. It's just four little segments, 4 1-inch segments that are wired together. Here's how I'll handle the bottom dome, much the same way, except for the fact that because this is a solid hunk of, that's like 5/8 inch, at least a 1/2 inch of solid resin, I don't need to worry about light blocking that at all. So I'll just solder 3 segments together here and feed the wire up through this hole, and that still has a hole for the strobe that goes there, but I can pack the fiber fill inside of it and pop that down and then run the wire. The wiring that goes from the strobe, or not the strobes, the marker lights, the red and green marker lights that are out here at the back corners. There's a green one here and a red one there, and then the red lights that are the impulse engines. Those will all line up and they'll feed down into here and then up through the hole, the major hole here. It'll be routed from here all the way into there and then feed into the top, and then follow the long maze of wiring that's going to attach all this stuff together. Alrighty, one last bit for the day, and that is I am starting to work on the light blocking for the inside of the upper saucer here. Just putting in wedges of the silver tape to block the light. Morning folks, it's Thursday. It's the gateway to the weekend, and I woke up from in a cold sweat from a sound sleep. I realized I've got exactly a week. A week from today, I will be pulling into the Crown Plaza in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am not ready to go by any stretch. So I have got to actually cut out what I'm going to do today, cut it down, and get it done, and get concentrated on getting my packing done and getting my models ready. Well, these windows are going down pretty nicely. I'm trying to make sure that they are in a row, but that of course depends on the indents in the casting to begin with. I'm trying to keep to them. You don't want to have a bunch of pits where windows are supposed to be when you've taken all the masks off, but of course cutting universal vinyl sizes helps, because any of these windows that are slightly out of round or are not quite fully formed, I can do this oversized bit of vinyl, and that will make sure that once they have been painted, they will all be the same correct size. But I think, well, I'm doing it differently now on camera, but what I had been doing was putting all the long ones in and then filling in between with the circular windows, and now I'm just going down the line and putting in what has to happen next, whether it's a long or a short. Both have their advantages. Let's see, now see I went and lost my pattern here. It's long, short, long, short, 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 long, short, long. You see the pattern here after a while. And then having the inside taped off also helps, because that helps show me the circumference line. But I'll go through and touch all these up and maybe move them around a little bit before I put the primer on. Alrighty, all the windows are down. Now they may or may not have that much of a bearing on how the actual filming model looked, but at this point I had to kind of stick with what was molded into the hull and make it fit. So my best I could do is to make sure that they are following the same radius and that they were consistent in their grouping, but whether or not they're a little bit wonky is still up for debate. Looked pretty good if you look at it across the side. Yeah, let's go get some primer and get some lunch, and then get some primer on these, and then that'll be a good place to leave this for today, and I can do a little bit of work on the pontoon. The good news is the mail has come, and Elliot Brown, who is a better friend than I deserve, and a heck of a guy, has sent me a circuit that I can use for all the strobes. Let me go get it. I have pulled the pontoon back in here, but look at this lovely little board. Homemade nonetheless. Guy's a genius. I couldn't do a fifth of this. Now this is a very weak battery. One of the things I have to get when I'm out at lunch is some new batteries, but this is a very weak battery, but you can see it's got enough strobes on there for me to do the entire ship. I am going to have to cut these leads, of course, and bring them further out into the ship. Obviously, he had no idea of knowing how long of a lead I would need on any of these. So that's all. That all goes without saying. But just for the sake of grins and shiggles here, if you look at something like that, that's exactly the right size. So do that, and then you take like this bottom dome. That's exactly, oops, drop the bottom dome. That's exactly how that's going to look. So thanks again, Elliot. You have pulled my bacon out of the fire. And here is the famous Elliot Brown circuit in operation here. But you can see the, well, let me turn this off. You can see the strobing on the back of the nacelles. They are very bright. As you can tell, or maybe you can't because it's light, I've started graying. Yes, I got my primer paint out and I've started graying everything. Working on this top deck that goes on the front, I've decided that I want to not leave it as it is. I want to cut it at this point. A, because this is a natural paint line. This is one color and this is where another color starts. And B, I can go ahead and fix this joint then, how it joins to the back half of the pontoon top. And this area here is over that armature that I've built. So when I put this down, I can epoxy that down over the armature and make it even stronger. Hey everybody, it's Friday. It's the last work day of the week, and it's going to be the last work day for a couple weeks, I think. Everyone knows by now Wonderfest is next week. By this time next week, I will be, it will be Friday, and it will be the first day of Wonderfest. No, well, Wonderfest doesn't really start on a Friday. Everybody's there, but the programming is Saturday and Sunday, but who are we kidding? Everybody's there on Friday. So, I wanted to show you, I've got a lot of the, Grissom sprayed with the first coat of primer, and it's showing off a lot of stuff that you don't see when the parts are clear. And I am seeing not only where I have my windows down, but I'm seeing the spots, particularly up in this upper dome, where the windows that I put down did not match the indents on the kit. So I'm going to have to fill those in with some putty, and also some nicks and scratches around the sides here that have to be filled in, that weren't really visible back when I was working with this as a clear piece. So that's what primer is there for. It's there to show you where the flaws are, so you go back in and you fix the flaws. So I'll be doing that, but I think what I'm going to be concentrating on today is working on this hatch that's going to be magnetized, and getting this back and middle section glued together. I can't attach this until I get the rest of my wiring. I've got the strobes, but I've got no running lights, the red and greens. So until that, I can't really close anything up, but I can get a pretty good idea as to whether or not this one channel is going to be enough. Something is telling me it's not, to get my wiring everywhere it needs to go. The bulk of my circuitry and batteries and switches will be right in here. That's why I'm making this, this hatch that I can remove. But getting everything up into this flat plate, into the engines, into the dome here, I don't know whether these leads are, this area is going to be enough, because I have to figure out that there are 3 different leads that need to go the length here. One of them is the strobe, one of them is the constant on navs, and also I think I'm going to have to put the windows on a separate circuit. So if I have to do that, then I need to run leads for that as well. Okay, everything is nailed down and rubber banded to within an inch of its life. And what I'm left with is this nice gap right here. This is in position. This is locked in position. I needed to raise the deck up just a tiny bit to make this level. I will shim that from the bottom when I'm done. But my goal right now is to make this joint here go away. So it's a gap. It was a gap originally. It was a gap when it came. It's trying to eliminate it. I can put, what I'm going to do is mix up some epoxy sculpt and kind of jam it in this this crevice here and into that crevice, and sploosh it together, trim out the side, and that's gonna be that. I can do a little bit of gluing back and forth, but these parts, these halves, aren't really touching like they should be. There goes the phone. Somebody wants to sell me insurance, I'll bet. Alrighty, the piece is down. It's got the putty jammed in there, and there's nothing to do but to let that cure. And now we will turn our attentions to this front edge. I'm going to slide some of these rubber bands up here to keep this center panel in place. Keep all of that stationary. Take these ones off. And now we've got a wonderful edge here. I've already traced this off so I can see how much more I've got to sand down there. Alright, I've got the first 2 magnets, the frontal magnets here in place. And I just put a wad of epoxy sculpt in there and sunk the magnets down into them. And I countersunk them enough that I have room for, this will be a piece of metal that will be glued to, or epoxy to the top here. So I do this, and then I push it all down, and that gives me the right elevation for the strip. So we'll let that cure for at least an hour or so before I go any further. I suppose I could go ahead and do the back ones, do this so that they're all curing at the same time, and that will kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but you still end up with a bunch of dead birds. Sincerely counting on picking up some new epoxy sculpt. Look, it's way down at the bottom of the and this is the hardener part, I think. It's part B. But it is getting down to the bottom of the barrel, so hopefully I will be able to get Mo next week. I'm pulling out all of the kits. What you don't see in the other room is I'm pulling out all of the candidates for this year's trip and setting them on the table in the living room to see if that's in fact what I'm going to take, and then how much work they might need to get ready to go. All that's kind of happening while this is curing, so I'm again trying to make the most of my time here. Alright, it's been a while. I've let the epoxy sculpt cure. It's not completely cured. It won't completely cure until overnight, but enough that I can stress test the magnets. And so here are the magnets. I just super glued some broken X-Acto blades onto the top there, and there's your result. Strong as the day is long. I can pick straight up on it and it won't come off until I kind of slide it to the side, which is a sign of a good magnet. So I'm going to let this cure the rest of the time. Not going to disturb that. The other thing is, you know, you can, here's your philosophy for the day. Some things are like Thanos. They are inevitable. You can fight it, you can run from it, you can do all that stuff Thanos did in that speech, but you're going to come back to it eventually. And the truth of the fact of the matter is, I was going to end up putting a channel in both pylons. I was fighting it, but I knew it was going to happen. So now that I've got the channel in both pylons for the wiring, I can go ahead and actually glue these pylons in place today, because the channel has been cut into them. All of the wiring can be fed into these channels. So what I would like to do at this point is get my template out again, or my mock-up of the top plate, so that I know what my distance is. And I would like to go ahead and epoxy those pylons in today, and I think that would be a good and showy thing for progress for the week. Yes, this is still only rubber banded down. I cannot glue that down until I have the red and green lights in the tail. But there's really nothing stopping me at this point from putting these in, and they can be that clear 5-minute epoxy. Actually, I think I'm going to use the 15-minute epoxy, even because it sets up better. I can be letting that cure over the weekend and into next week, since I won't be doing any additional work. Okay, I've got the epoxy on the back part of the, well, actually I've got the epoxy on all of the pins holding the pylons into that armature that I made. Pushed them in, squared them up against my template, and you can see that big old gap that's happening right there. That's the gap that has to happen to make the pylons come out square, and it's roughly the same on both sides. So that'll of course be packed in with epoxy sculpt, but actually that's going to help, that gap is going to help when it comes to running the wiring down, because there's actually a channel, well, you can't see it because I've got it all covered up, but there's a channel towards the back where the wiring comes down, and this piece is covering this right now where I've got a little notch cut in. But that's going to help me put the wiring in. Once that wiring is in, I can pack that with epoxy sculpt. I could do it from the bottom anyway, but I want to leave the gap open on the top because that's where the wiring needs to go. So perhaps over the weekend, while after this has had a chance to cure, I can flip it over and reinforce the bottom of that wing joint, the pylon joint there, with some epoxy sculpt. I'll zoom back out so you can see the whole thing. But take that, and then you put the lid over the top of it, and that gives you a good secondary hull slash pylon. You can see the brass that I've got running through here just to keep these lined up. And yeah, we're gonna let those wings cure in place. I keep calling them wings, they're pylons. Okay, here's where we're gonna leave it. We've got the two major halves here. Now this is just all set down. This is not in any way, shape glued. This obviously goes on the bottom anyway. But we can see the progress that's been made, particularly on the bottom half. This is in great shape. What you're not seeing is the stand. I've put a coat of black, gloss black paint on that. It's outside drying. Got the channeling figured out for the wiring, which was the big sticking point. Once we figured that out, everything else is kind of gravy. And you'll see that we are down to just these two little bits here on the top deck. By some careful planning on where the channels are going to go, that's the only bit that needs to be covered up. So I'm really happy with how I figured that out. And that's where it's going to sit for a while. It's going to be a while before I get back to it. I've got other fish to fry. And that's where we're going to end it for the week. The week that was, the second week on the Grissom. As I said, next week, there will not be a video next week. Get used to that right now, because what's going to happen is I'm going to be spending the week getting ready for Wonderfest, and then driving to Wonderfest, and next weekend is Wonderfest. So there will be no video. Of course, I'll take the camera. I'll shoot copious amounts of footage and some still pictures, and that'll all get put together when I get back into town Monday. So I would look for maybe Tuesday, Wednesday. I will upload everything that I have done, edit it together in some form or fashion, and so it'll be late. There will not be a weekend video next week. So until we see you again, be good to each other, be safe, be smart, be sensible, be at Wonderfest if you can, and more importantly, be back next week.